Good day, everyone, especially to our instructor, Mr. Anthony Gamale. Sir, good day, sir. I I am Eugene Leon, taking Criminology third year, Section A. So this day, I tackle about the Chapter 22, which is the scene of the crime operation, or Soco. So, before we proceed, first, we should determine the crime scene. So, crime scene defined as an area or vicinity of occurrence of physical evidences. So, next, crime scene investigation. So, crime scene investigation is the conduct of processes, more particularly the recognition, search, handling, and preservation and documentation of physical evidence to include the identification and interview of witnesses and the arrest of suspect at the crime scene. So what is the purpose of a crime scene search? So first, to systematically look for physical evidences that may prove useful in establishing that a crime has been committed. Next is to determine what method of operation the perpetrator may have used. So let's back to the crime scene. So, what constitutes a crime scene? So, the crime scene can be understood to include all areas in which the criminal, any possible victim, and any eyewitnesses moved during the time that crime was committed. In some crimes, however, the crime scene may actually comprise several different sizes. So, example of this illustrative case. So, one evening, a young girl was forcibly abducted from her bedroom. She was then transported by car to a small hut in an isolated place. Then and there, she was willfully, feloniously, and intentionally sexually assaulted. Subsequently, the abductor shot her to death, and then the former carried the body into the woods, where buried it in a shallow grave. So what are the location in the given example of the constitute crime case? So first is bedroom, second is the car, third is the small hut, fourth is the area ground or the grave. So, crime scene investigation. So, crime scene investigation, we have the first responder. So, first responder is any police officer who first arrives at the same or the crime scene and shall endeavor to protect and secure the crime scene. The first responder must be able to properly preserve the crime scene in order to get maximum scientific information that will help in the successful prosecution of the perpetrator of the crime. So the first responder must do the following upon arrival at the crime scene. So, first is cordon off the crime scene with whatever available materials like police line, if available. If available, may use ropes, straws, or human barricade. So next is evacuate injured persons to the nearest hospital. So the injured person must evacuate directly to the nearest hospital to avoid death. So next is prepare to take the dying declaration of severely injured person if any. So direct declaration of dying person when when they're on the crime scene area. So next is prevent entry, exit of persons within the cordoned area. So prevent any intruders to 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 enter the crime scene area or to exit any perpetrator of the crime scene. So next is prepare to brief the investigation of the situation upon their arrival. So prepare the investigator for the arrival of the other officer of the crime scene. So next is crime scene analysis or crime scene response. Crime scene analysis or crime scene response is much more than processing, searching, and documenting like notes, photos, sketches, and certainly more than packaging or collecting and tagging or the preserving evidences. Crime scene analysis is a slow, methodical, systematic, and orderly process of collecting physical evidences based on proper recognition and collection to be processed in the laboratory by forensic examiners to uncover significant clues from them. So next is crime laboratories. Do not solve crime. Only a true and competent investigation conducted by a professional police officers enhance chances for the successful outcome of a criminal investigation. If the investigator cannot recognize or preserve physical evidence, no sophisticated machine in the laboratory or technical expertise can save the situation. So next is, it must be noted that in the crime scene, proper investigation must be made for the identification and successful prosecution of the person responsible for the commission of a crime. So let's proceed to the following list of physical evidence which will most likely yield significant result upon examination. So first result is example: blood, semen, and saliva, liquid or dried or animal and human. Next is documents like written and typed, just like paper, ink, indented writings, obliterations, and burned or charred documents. Next is drugs. Next is explosive. If any object that contains an explosive residue. Next is hairs and fibers. Next is fingerprints, latent and visible. Next is firearms and ammunition. Next is glass particles or fragrance that may have been transferred to person or object involved in a crime. Next is impressions like shoe prints, depressions in soil and other tracks, gloves and fabric impressions. and bite marks. So next is the case or the cases falling under the Soco category. First is murder. Second is homicide. Third is rape with homicide. Fourth is arson. Fifth is robbery with homicide. And the last is other heinous or the sensational cases are directed by the higher headquarters, and other cases where Soco assistant or assistance is necessary. So next is the composition of the Soco team. So first we have the team leader. Next is the driver or the evidence custodian. Next is the Soco specialist or the technicians. And also we have a health officer. Next is the crime photographer. And next is the sketcher or the measurer officer, or next is the forensic chemical officer. So basic Soco equipment materials. So we have the first is the police line. Next is the measuring device, or example ruler and measuring tape. Next is the recording materials, example like chalk, notebook, sketching and paper pad, pencils, pentel pens, permanent ink, markers and coupon bands. Next we have SLR camera with film. Next we have the video camera. Next we have the tape recorder. Next is evidence collection kit, and also we have compass. Next is searchlight with battery charger. Next is the evidence tags, markers, and next we have the first aid kit. Next we have the paper bags, all sizes, and next we have the stylus. Next we have the vernier caliper. Next we have the micrometer. Next is the paraffin wax. Next is the Soco form or the scene of the crime operation form and crime lab request form. Next we have gloves, and next we have the gauze, and also we have the fingerprint card and black and white latent lifting card for the fingerprint. And next we have the eraser, and also we have the stapler with extra staple wire, and next is the kit board. So this is the basic Soco equipment materials, but that is the basic equipments for the crime scene of the crime operation materials or equipment. Next is we have the scene of the crime operation tools. So what this is for? So first is the flashlights. Next is the scissors. Next is knife or the heavy duty and folding knives. Example of this is cutter, and other knives, direct to fold. And next is ruler and other measuring tape. And next we have the adjustable wrench. Next is we have the pliers. And next we have the wire cutters. Next is we have the complete screwdriver. Next is saw. And next is we have the hammer. And next is the axe or hatchet. Next is shovel. And also we have the fingerprint magnifier. And next is nylon brush. Next is magnet. Next tool is spatula. And next are box of plaster or boxes. Next is goggles. And also we have the sitting screen, funnels, scalpels, and the last is ladder. So this is the basic equipment for the Soco team, and this is the Soco tools. And let's proceed to the evidence container or the preparation. So we have the basic equipments. So basic equipments of the Soco team is the police line. Next is the marker. Next is camera with film. Next is evidence collection kit. And next is video camera and tape recorder. Next is measuring device. So example of this is ruler and measuring tape, and flashlight, hand gloves, mask, eye goggles, and hairnet. So next is we have the recording materials like chalk, bond paper, pencils, clipboard, and pintel pens. So before we proceed, so evidence containers for the Soco team is first is glass vials, next is absorbent cottons, and next is cardboard boxes, next is paper bags and string tags, next is plastic balloons, and the last is evidence tape. So this is the equipment, tools, and the basic equipments for the preparation of the crime scene or the Soco team. So let's proceed to the approaching the crime scene. So always be alert, make permanent notes as to possible entry and exit points of the perpetrator. So always alert that taking notes of the crime scene areas, and crime scene investigation proper. So crime scene investigation proper is the following are the procedures in the crime scene investigation proper. So first is we have the receipt of briefing and designation of command post. Next is initiation of preliminary survey. Next is preparation of narrative report, and next is documentation of the crime scene, and next is the crime scene sketches. Next is detailed search, and next is collection of physical evidence, and next is conduct of final survey, and the last is release of the crime scene. So receipt of briefing and assignation of command post. So a team leader upon arrival at the crime scene received the briefing from the first responder and shall immediately designate a command post. So what is the command post? Command post is an area which is ideally located adjacent to the crime scene where the CSI evidence custodian stays and receives the places of evidence turned over to him for safekeeping by the other evidence collectors. So next is we have the initiation of preliminary survey. So the team leader makes a general assessment of the crime scene, takes a cautious walkthrough of the crime scene, takes down extensive notes to document importance factors and establish the evidence most likely to be encountered. He then defines the extent of the search area to determine personnel and equipment needed and makes specific assignments. From his assessments, he develops a general theory of a crime scene. So we have the initiation of preliminary survey. So next step is to prepare or the preparation of narrative report. So the team leader use the systematic approach in making a narrative report. So next, we have the documentation of the crime scene. So documentation. A photographer shall begin taking photographs as soon as possible. The taking of photographs of the crime scene must be from general to specific areas. The evidence collectors shall not touch or move any evidence where it's originally located until it has been identified, photographed, sketches, measured, and recorded. So that is the documentation of the crime scene. So after the documentation, we have the crime scene sketches. So crime scene sketches, a rough sketch shall be prepared indicating the actual measurement of things with scale and proportion observed and oriented to the North Pole. All necessary information shall be placed in the sketch. So after taking crime scene sketch, we have the detailed search. So detailed search. The search for physical evidence must be done using the accepted method of search depending upon the actual location to be searched. So next is we have the collection of physical evidence. So collection of physical evidence, the competence to recognize the properly collect physical evidence is critical to both solving and prosecuting crimes. The team leader should be informed always of the significant evidence located. It must be noted that the evidence collector should put his initial location, evidence, custodian for documentation and for their safekeeping. So next for the collection of the physical evidence, so next is we have the conduct of final survey. So conduct of final survey. The team leader shall make a final review or the final survey of the crime scene to determine whether or not the processing has been completed. So next, for the conduct of final survey, next is we have the release of the crime scene. So release of the crime scene, the release of the crime scene shall be done if the investigator is satisfied that the pieces of evidence have been recovered. However, the investigator must evaluate the items recovered from the result of interrogation of the suspects and the interview of the witnesses. It must be noted that upon formal release of the crime scene to the proper authority, a warrant is already required for his re-entry of the crime scene. So these are the following of procedures of the crime scene investigation proper. So let's proceed to the crime scene photography. So what is the purpose of the crime scene photography? So the purpose of crime scene photography is taking photographs of the crime scene is to create an accurate, objective, visual report of the crime scene before any physical evidence is moved or removed from its original location. So next is we have the guidelines for taking photographs of a crime scene. So during the conduct of the crime scene operation, the basic of photographs of the crime scene should be taken as soon as possible before the start of note-taking, sketching, and searching for physical evidence is useful. So it must be noted that the photograph should illustrate the original uncontaminated condition of the crime scene. So when you take any photographs, it should be original to uncontaminate condition for the processing through the prosecution. So next is we have the photographs should be taken of the crime scene. Photographs should only taken at the crime scene. No investigator or any police personnel should be photographed on the crime scene. The photographs must form an organized sequence and show all relevant location and object. The crime scene photographs must progress from general to specific. So the importance of taking photographs, it should be from the object and the data that 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 they gathered through the crime scene, and not taking any pictures like police officers and other relevant pictures through the crime scene. So next is the crime scene sketches. Sketches are useful in questioning the suspect and witnesses, as well as in writing the investigative report. So a rough sketch must be made indicating the actual measurement of things with scale and proportion object, and oriented to the North Pole, as necessary information must be placed in the sketch. So sketching are excellent companions to photographs. Where photographs provide exact details, sketches gives accurate information about the placement of object, and they show relationship and distance between things. So sketches are very useful. So we have the sketches and the object to have the relationship between their distance and things, which be how to use and to commit it to a crime. So that is the sketches are useful. through the crime scene. So, note-taking. So, note-taking must be constant activity throughout the processing of the crime scene. So, note must include the details written description of the crime scene with location or physical evidence received. So, next is the time when the physical evidence was discovered. So, first is detailed written description of the crime scene with location or physical evidence received. So, detailed written, always be details that the officer written any of the crime scene report and its location for the direct or the accurate to their process for for investigation. So next is the time when the physical evidence was discovered. So time is very important. So by taking the physical evidences discovered, we should we should we should write a time on it. So next is the person who discovered and collect the physical evidences. So the one who discovered the physical evidences or the one who collected the evidence should write a person. Example, I am the one who collect the physical evidence, and my name will write for the one who discovered and collect the evidences. So next is how the evidence was packaged and marked. So the evidence should be marked and packaged to avoid the perpetrator to get or easy to get the evidences. So next is the disposition of the item when it was collected. And we have the documentation. Documentation is made by the crime scene investigator for purpose of future crime scene reconstruction, which will help the prosecutor and the judge understand condition at the crime scene. So documentation is very important at the crime scene for the purpose of for the purpose of constant relief to the judge or the prosecutor. So next is we have the crime scene search. So next is we have the crime scene search. The search of physical evidence is done using the accepted method of search depending upon the actual location to be searched. So the purpose of the crime scene search could only be started after the crime scene has been photographed and sketched. So the primary duty of the Soco team leader upon arrival at the crime scene is to make proper condition with the investigator on case of the officer in charge for the purpose of coordination and to secure the approval of investigator before the Soco assumes control of the crime scene. The team may proceed with the processing after conducting the general survey and after establishing a common approach path. So as every crime scene is unique, the employment of each method of search depending upon the physical nature of the crime scene and the kind of offense involved. Each approach varies as the situation dictates. For purposes of scene of the crime operation or SOCO or crime scene processing, the following methods may be employed. So first crime scene search is quadrant or zone search method. Second is strip or line search method. And the third is spiral search method. And fourth is grid or double strip grid search method. And the last is wheel search method. So what is quadrant or zone search method? So quadrant or zone search method. In this method, the searcher is assigned to a quadrant. Then each quadrant is cut into another set of quadrant. So this is the example of the quadrant or zone search method. So next is we have the strip or line search method. So strip or line search method. In this method, the area is blocked out in the form of a rectangle as a searcher proceeds slowly at the same pace along path parallel to one side of the rectangle. When a piece of evidence is found, the offender announces his discovery at the search must stop until the evidence has been cared for. A photographer is called if necessary. The evidence is collected and tagged and the search process at given signal. At the end of the rectangle and searcher turns and proceed along new line and show in the above illustration. So strip or line search method. This search method is like the rice. Kanang kuan, kahumayan, no? Kanang mabantayan man nato na pag kuan, kanang magturtol na, kanang pagkuan. So makita man nato pag turtle, straight ang ilang pagkuan. Straight lang gid na sila, daw pabalik is another straight and straight na sad. So that is the strip or line search method. So next of the strip or line search method, we have the spiral search method. So in this method, the searcher follow each other along the path of the spiral, beginning of the outside and spiraling in towards the center. So this spiral search method is just like a fingerprint. So when we say fingerprint, we have a core. So starting with the core and go along with circle to the exit of the crime scene. So this is the example of the spiral search method. So as you can see, it's just like a fingerprint. This is a core and path forming a circle through the exit of the crime scene area. So we have the spiral search method. Next is grid or double strip search method. So grid or double strip search method. The grid or double strip method of search is a modification or a strip search method. Here's the rectangle is traverse first parallel to the base, then parallel to the side. So this is the example of the grid or double strip search method. As you can see, this is a form of rectangle and this rectangle have pieces of small rectangle. So this search method is modification through the parallel to the side. So we have the grid or double strip search method, and next is we have the last, the wheel search method. So what is wheel search method? So in this method of search, the area is considered to be approximately circular. the searcher gathered at the center and proceed outward along radii or spokes. The procedure should be repeated several times depending on the size of the circle and the number of the searcher. One shortcoming of this method is the great increase in the area to be observed as the searcher depart from the center. Another in the possibility of evidence contamination or destruction with the likelihood that the searcher will step on them as they converge at the center. So this is the example of the wheel search method. So as you can see, is a form of circle and have the arrow. Each arrow is the police officer. So this method of search is conducted outward along radii or spokes. So there are on the center and step up to the outer of the crime scene area. So crime scene search. This crime scene search is based upon the situation. So crime scene search is based upon the location and crime scene search is based upon the situation and area where the crime scene has been committed. Example of this is through the highway. So highway. So as we can see, as the highway road, they are wide, or we used to apply the wheel search method or the grid or double strip method or the quadrant or zone search method. So depending on the situation of the crime scene, for the process of gathering evidences of the crime scene and to locate where the object and who is the perpetrator of the crime scene committed. So last is, what is the purpose of our crime scene search? So the purpose of our crime scene search is to systematically look for physical evidence that may prove useful in establishing that a crime has been committed. So systematically look for any physical evidence that may prove useful for prosecuting to the judge and may direct ban to the person who commit the crime, and this is very useful for our police officers or the scene of the crime operation or the Soco team, the crime scene search, to establish their investigation of the crime scene. So next is to determine what method of operation the perpetrator may have used. So to determine the perpetrator, what object he used and what is her purpose of making a crime, and to gather any evidences of our officers or the authority to the crime scene areas. So this is for today. Thank you for listening, everyone, and good day, sir. Thank you and God bless.